Hi, this is Alex from devstories.eu, OpenAPI and Swagger Ecosystem, Episode 5 of 19. Every REST API needs endpoints, but how do you mathematically prove to a machine which HTTP methods are allowed where? You map them out logically. Today, we look at mapping the API paths and operations. Think of the paths object in OpenAPI as the central router of your documentation. It acts as a directory that maps relative URLs to specific capabilities. Before looking at what goes inside, we must clarify a common misunderstanding. Paths must always begin with a /. They're strictly relative to your server URL, never absolute. If your API is hosted at api.example.com, your path is simply /users, not the full domain. The specification relies on this exact formatting to append the path to the base server address correctly. Inside the paths object, you define individual routes using string keys. The value assigned to each route key is called a path item object. A path item object is fundamentally just a container. It groups together all the HTTP methods allowed on that specific URL. It does not dictate inputs or outputs directly. Instead, it holds keys representing standard HTTP methods, such as get, post, put, or delete. When you map one of those HTTP methods inside a path item, the value you attach to it is an operation object. The operation object is where the actual action is defined. It describes exactly what a client can do when sending that specific method to that exact path. To visualize the structure, consider a standard user management endpoint. In your root paths object, you define a key called /users. The value attached to it is your path item object. Inside that container, you define a get key and a post key. The get key contains an operation object that explains how the API returns a list of users. The post key contains a completely separate operation object that describes how to create a new user. Both operations share the identical /users URL, but the specification treats them as distinct logical actions nested under their respective HTTP method keys. Inside every operation object, you will typically define two fields to establish identity, the summary and the operation ID. The summary is a short string meant for human readers. For the get method on our /users path, the summary might simply read list all registered users. It shows up in generated documentation interfaces so developers can scan the available endpoints quickly. Here is the key insight. The operation ID field is meant for the machines. It is a unique string used to identify the operation across your entire API document. Code generators rely heavily on the operation ID to name the functions and methods inside the client SDKs they build. If you give your get operation an operation ID of list users, the generated Python or TypeScript client will feature a function specifically called list users. This string must be absolutely unique. If two operations share the same operation ID, automated generation tools will produce broken code or crash entirely. The structure relies on strict, predictable nesting. Paths map to path items map to HTTP methods, and methods map to operation objects defined by unique identifiers. Mastering this exact hierarchy guarantees that both human developers and downstream automation tools can interact with your API architecture without guessing. That's your lot for this one. Catch you next time.